Hello, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for State of Flux, which is episode 10 of season 1 of Star Trek Voyager. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Voyager one episode at a time. In this video, I cover the first season episode of State of Flux. So State of Flux is the episode in which the crew are down on the planet trying to gather supplies, and they encounter the Kazon and barely manage to get away from them, and then later they encounter the same Kazon ship in distress, and it was exploded inside, and many people died and fused to the walls in horrific ways, and they managed to only save one crew member. And as they're investigating, they find that Federation technology is at the heart of it, and this Federation technology is in fact from Voyager. So Tuvok deduces that someone on the Voyager crew is conspiring with the Kazon and giving them Federation technology, which is very much against what Janeway wants to do. And due to Tuvok's investigating, they narrow it down to two possible suspects, Seska and Joe Carey. And as they continue to investigate this, Chakotay has had a past relationship with Seska, which makes it a bit complicated, and she tries to insist to him that she was innocent of this. As they continue to investigate, B'Elanna Torres discovers that the technology in question was in fact a food replicator, something that might seem simple to them, but has the potential to transform a society that does not have this technology. And they encounter the Maj, Kola, who is very antagonistic, and when he asks to speak to the survivor, he in fact just kills him, because they obviously don't want him to give away anything to the Voyager crew. So after sort of investigating, Tuvok and Chakotay set up a ruse to try to root out who the spy is. And the Doctor also determines that Seska is actually a Cardassian and not a Bajoran, and she was a Cardassian spy sent to spy on the Maquis. So they set up their plan, but because just because she's a Cardassian doesn't mean she's a Kazon spy. So they set up the plan, and she does in fact reveal herself. And she, once she's exposed, she says that they're trapped in the Delta Quadrant because of stupid Federation dogma, and that if they really want to survive, that they need to make alliances, and that includes sharing technology. And then when Janeway tries to arrest her, she beams away to the Kazon ship, and then the two more Kazon ships are on their way, and they would be completely outnumbered, so they decide to flee and let her get away with it. And this leaves Chakotay musing to Tuvok about how there were so many spies on his ship, Tuvok and Seska. Was anyone actually working for him? And Tuvok tries to reassure him that he wasn't a fool because he was deceived by her as well. So, I did this live stream a couple days ago about retcons, which is when they take something, they create, continuity backstory, out of nowhere, and it usually contradicts what came before, or is extremely obvious that this is something they never had planned, and they just make it up on the spot. One of the most infamous retcons in Star Trek is in the 5th season, when they say that Dr. Julian Bashir is genetically enhanced, because it's very clear that they never intended this to be the case until they made this episode. In fact, there's a lot of scenes and episodes that directly contradict this, and they try to make excuses for it by saying, oh, he was just lying or hiding it. But there's many things that just doesn't jive, even if you try to use that excuse, and it's very obvious that they're just making stuff up and trying to retroactively change it. Now, during that live stream, someone mentioned this Seska, the reveal that Seska is a Cardassian, as a retcon. And at first I was a bit, rejecting of that. But then the more I thought of it, I was like, okay, you have a point. Because there's not really anything to indicate she's a Cardassian. And because I know the way Star Trek operates usually, they probably didn't think of it until this episode. However, upon doing some research, I have discovered definitively, by definition, that this is not a retcon. Because, and this is actually very interesting, I didn't know this, they had introduced the character of Seska with the purpose of making her a Cardassian. That was always their plan. That was always their intention. And so retcons refer to, it stems from a retroactive continuity, which means they create continuity retroactively, which means they go back and retroactively change things. Oh yeah, like genetically, Bashir was genetically engineered this whole time. We're retroactively changing it. So by definition, that's not what happened here, because they're not retroactively changing the fact that Seska is a Cardassian. It was always the plan. There was always their intention. And in fact, if you look at it through that lens, you can see some setting up, that they were setting her up to be that way, because she was always sort of an antagonistic kind of rabble-rouser type character. Let's see. I want to bring up the list of episodes she appeared in. First episode she appeared in was Parallax, where they had her in a blue uniform, which is weird. And she was trying to egg Chakotay into starting a mutiny in that episode. Then there was Phage, which I don't really remember her much in that. I'm sure she was up to no good. Emanations, she was the transporter chief. And then Prime Factors, which is the very previous episode to this, she was conspiring with B'Elanna and Joe Carey to illegally obtain alien technology that would help them get home, which is so in line with what they reveal here. In fact, I think it's very clear from that episode, because when I just reviewed that episode, or I did my revisited for it, I stated that I wasn't sure if they knew that she was a Cardassian when they wrote that episode, but I was guessing that they did, because she was really acting that way. Now I know for a fact that they knew full well that she was a Cardassian and working with the Kazon. And that really fits in that episode, because she's the one sort of being the devil on the shoulder of B'Elanna, trying to egg her on into breaking the rules. And she kept saying, oh, operate this device. And she was most straightforward, or most present, had the most to do in that episode out of all of her appearances before this one. So it's very clear that that was intentional, that they were doing that to set up for this episode, which leads me to a quote that Jerry Taylor said about this episode. So, actually, sorry, let me lay the groundwork before I get to the quote. So the groundwork is, this was the first script bought by, a freelancer in the show. So this was actually written earlier on. It was one of the first scripts written for the show, which is why it features the Kazon, because the Kazon were just in Caretaker. And so they knew that they were going to introduce someone on Chakotay's crew who was a Cardassian. I think the thing with the Kazon was brought up later, I think. The idea they said specifically was that someone on Chakotay's Maquis crew was a Cardassian spy all along. So they bought the script right away, but they held off on making it. The decision was made to hold it so that they could introduce the character first. And the actress Martha Hackett, who amazingly plays Seska, amazing actress, said in interviews that it was decided very early on that Seska was a Cardassian spy. She said it like the third or fourth episode. Now, the third episode is Time and Again, which she doesn't appear in. The fourth episode is Phage, which she does appear in. So, I don't know. Maybe it wasn't Parallax. Maybe it wasn't until Phage. Maybe they made her appearance in Parallax, and then after they saw her, they're like, hey, let's make her the spy. I'm not sure. They're not completely, totally clear, but they are clear that it was always their intention to make someone's in Chakotay's crew a Cardassian spy, and also from Martha Hackett's interview that they knew would be Seska fairly early on, if not from the very first appearance in the second or third. It would have been the second. She said third or fourth episode that's Phage, because Emanation, her next appearance is in Emanations, which is episode 8. So according to her, it would have been by Phage that they knew that she would be a Cardassian spy. So yeah, they intentionally withheld this episode for production until episode 10, even though they could have made episode 4 or episode 5. They wanted to introduce this character. So now, let me get to this quote from Jerry Taylor, which I think, and she and Michael Piller were apparently on the same mind on this one because they were co-showrunners at the time. But let me get to this quote from her, which I think is very fascinating to me and so powerful. But anyway, okay, so quote, Seska comes about in a not so planned way. We realized it would probably be a good idea, since all of these people are new, if we did some stories in which we established this character before we did a whole episode about her. It would have more emotional resonance for the audience, and so we started doing that. Then we found her character to be very useful. You don't always have rumbling in the lower decks or mutinous people on a purely Starfleet ship. Seska gave us conflict and bite, and we actually pushed State of Flux further down the line so that we could use Seska. She was very well established by the time we got to it. It worked better than it might have simply because we had Seska in earlier episodes. People had the sense of who she was. Now, if you don't get why I'm so blown away by this statement and why I'm so impressed with that statement, is Jerry Taylor gets it. And Michael Piller agreed as well, so they both get it. This is something that later seasons will lose. During my coverage of Season 1 of Voyager, I've been talking a lot about how much gushing over Season 1, how much better it is than later seasons of Voyager because of the feeling of continuity, because of the sense of community, because of the character focus. But here is like one of the biggest things for me. And this is like a clear-cut example. Holding off on a script that focuses on a guest character so that you can slowly introduce that guest character. Have her in the background at first, just saying random things or hitting at the console, doing the transporter and being iced or whatever. But just have them be there so that the audience gets used to them, knows them, and in the previous episode they build her up and have her be one of the main characters of that episode to build to the big reveal. And this is exactly what the later seasons of Voyager do not fucking do. One specific example I can think of in later seasons is, actually I can think of two examples. There's the episode Latent Image, where there was an ensign from the year previous who apparently died, and they erased her from the doctor's memory because it caused a feedback loop or whatever, and apparently they were good friends with her, and they went to her birthday party, and yeah, so they erased her or whatever. That ensign was never seen, never mentioned, or any hide or hell or tail or anything before that episode. But let me give you a worst example. Is in season 6. Oh god, I'm blanking on the name of the episode. Now I'm going to have to look it up as I talk. But in season 6, they have an episode where they have this crew member who apparently was romantically interested, not involved yet, but somewhat romantically interested in Harry Kim, and she had died a year or two previously, and her body was found by this alien race that revived her but turned her into a different alien. She's supposed to be a totally different person and a part of this alien race, but she still has her Voyager memories, and she goes back and sees Harry Kim, and they have a fling, they have a romance, and she wants to stay with Voyager, but eventually determines that she's no longer that person, ashes to ashes. There we go. Ashes to ashes. And and so she goes back with the aliens. And so that character, you guessed it, never shown, mentioned, or anything before this episode. And that is, and I'll get to that episode eventually, but that is the main reason why I don't like, and in fact cannot enjoy that episode, because I can't buy it. I cannot buy that there's this person that we never fucking see that died off screen and has a romance with Harry off screen, or that the crew cares about off screen. In fact, it was my supposition that they should have made her that same ensign from Latent Image. At the very least, we would know of that character's existence. But no, they didn't. They didn't make her an established character. They didn't purposely try to set her up first for the storyline. They just retconned it. This is exactly what a retcon is. Retroactive continuity. Oh, let's just say this person was on this ship the whole time. Let's just retroactively make up this backstory and say it happened all along. And it's so key. Like, that's how much I love Jerry Taylor's quote, because it's so key that is exactly what they did not do in this instance. And this is something I've been railing about in Voyager, and how it falls apart in the later seasons because it loses the serialization, it loses the sense of continuity, and that is because it lost Michael Piller and Jerry Taylor. After Michael Piller was pushed out the show at the end of season 2, specifically because he was trying to make the show more serialized. And then Jerry Taylor, I'm not sure of why Jerry Taylor left. I haven't heard any stories, so I couldn't say anything. I would say it was pure conjecture. I mean, I would guess, my speculation would be that she just couldn't put up with Rick Berman and he was being too overbearing and they were having creative differences. But again, I'm totally making that up on the top of my head. Maybe it was totally unrelated. But anyway, that would be my wild speculation. But for whatever reason, she left the show after season 4. Funny enough, you lose the character story, you lose the sense of community, you lose the sense of continuity. You have people like Joe Manaski and Brennan Braga take over, where Brennan Braga said that he thinks Star Trek should not be serialized and should remain episodic. And you also get Joe Manaski, who actively hated continuity and says, I don't give a fuck about continuity. Maybe he didn't use the word fuck, but he did outright say that. And of course Rick Berman, who hates serialization. Those who you had in charge of the show. And it blows my mind that I've heard some reviewers try to claim that the first 2 seasons were even more out of whack with continuity. Like, are you paying any goddamn attention? Like, I mean, the only thing even close to continuity they did in the later seasons is 7 of 9. And the biggest thing is probably the Borg children, because granted they did a little arc with the Borg children, but they introduced them first in an episode and they kept them around. I will give them credit for that. But that's pretty much it. They didn't do this level of like pre-planning, of setting up for a storyline, of say, hey, we had this idea for a story, but let's not do it right now. Like, we had this idea, this is a story with Ashes to Ashes where this character comes back from the dead. Let's not do it right now. Instead, let's actually introduce that character. First, show her die. Show that she has this thing with Harry Kim. And have her appear in several episodes so that the audience is familiar with her, knows who she is, and then we'll do Ashes to Ashes. That way we'll have more impact. And that's exactly why that episode sucks. And that's exactly why this episode is awesome. Because they did it the right way. I'm just so impressed with that quote from Jerry Taylor. Now, you might argue that I didn't know that Seska was planned for until I just read these quotes a couple days ago. But the thing is, the reason why I would doubt it is not because of anything I saw on screen. It's because of the research and that I've done on Star Trek that I realized it was par for the course to do this shit. As much as I love Deep Space Nine, they do it all the time. Like I said, with Bashir's genetically enhancements is just the worst example. It's not by any means the only example. There's the whole Nog wanting to join Starfleet. I've already talked about when I covered that, how that is wildly inconsistent with how they were portraying Nog. Even the very previous episode, the episode that came right before the one where he revealed he wanted to join Starfleet, vastly contradicts him wanting to join Starfleet. And so, yeah. And in many cases, I can let it slide. Because as I said in the live stream, not all retcons are bad retcons. There can be good retcons if they use it for good. But my point is, and the reason why I doubt it, that Seska was planned for from the beginning, is not because I think it's wildly inconsistent. It's not because, there's nothing to indicate she's a Cardassian. She's definitely not, and this actually contradicts her being a Cardassian. Obviously, that's not the case, because they knew she was. And so nothing like that is why I would doubt it. The reason why I doubt it is because Star Trek does this shit all the time. And of course, Voyager later on some example. Again, those two examples are just two out of many. I could go on and on and on, but I'm not here to talk about later seasons. But many examples where they just retroactively change. Like, season 5 is the worst because they retroactively change the characters. They seem to have no idea how to write for these characters, and so try to change their whole characterization. They do with Janeway, Harry Kim, Chakotay, Tom Paris. Like, when the fuck did Chakotay like boxing? When the fuck did Tom Paris love the ocean and read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea? Like, they're just making shit up. By the way, season 5's after Jerry Taylor left. Not a coincidence. Not in the least bit a coincidence. But this is how you fucking do it. And this is why Jerry Taylor and Michael Piller were the best of Voyager, and this is why the show went to the tubes after they left. And that's not to say every single episode sucks. There's still some of my favorite episodes of Voyager are in season 5 and 6. I guess 7 a little bit. But 7's worse. So they could nail it from time to time, but the show as a whole, it just felt like a series of generic, episodic Star Trek cliches. Like, even through the good episodes, there was no cohesiveness holding it together the way that there is right fucking here in season 1. And I was just having a discussion with someone about season 1, how they disagreed with me being so positive on season 1, saying, it only has like 1 or 2 episodes that are actually really good. Well, I disagree with that. First of all, I think there are at least 4 great episodes in this season. But other than that, that's not the point. The point isn't how many great episodes there are, because even through the bad episodes of season 1, you have that sense of character. You have that sense of continuity. You have that sense of community. And that's what makes this episode so great. The fact that not only did they build up Seska, sort of spoiled it there. They also built up Joe Carey, which unfortunately disappears after this episode, which again was a huge mistake. And this was while Jerry Taylor and Michael Pelley were still around, so I will have to blame them for that too. They shouldn't have made him disappear. I don't know if it was the actor's availability, but if it wasn't, then yeah, that kind of sucks on them for not. And then they introduced like Hogan out of nowhere in season 2. They should have introduced him earlier. But at least season 2 is not as bad as season fucking 6. At that late stage, when you have a ship who's isolated and can't have new transfers on board, it's a little late to be introducing people and saying, "Oh, we were here all along." It just doesn't work. But season 2, I'll let you get away with that. But anyway, yeah. Just the writing for Seska is so good. So apparently, the episode title was originally Seska, but they changed it because they thought it would give away who the spy was, and they are very much correct. that was a smart move. I'm not sure if State of Flux was the best title they could come up with, because that sounds very like sci-fi-ish, but this isn't sci-fi at all. It's actually, a spy intrigue episode. I think it's an amazing spy intrigue episode. I think it's one of the best that the Star Trek franchise has done. So let's talk about the Kazon. I remember talking to people who saw, Voyager years and years and years ago. And they're like, I didn't really like season 1 because the Kazon suck and they're not that good. So, and I'm not holding it against them. They saw it years and years ago. I don't remember shit I've seen years and years and years ago either, but I had to... And I'm like, well, it might surprise you to know that the Kazon only appear twice in season 1. Caretaker and this episode. That's it. So you can't hold up the Kazon as, that's why I don't like season 1. Now, you could hold up the Kazon as why you don't like season 2, because they appear in season 2 a lot. And apparently some of the early season 2 episodes, like Initiations, was originally filmed for season 1, but for whatever reason they pushed it back to season 2. Don't ask me why. I'll have to get into this when I start covering season 2. But as it stands, they only appear twice in season 1. But a lot in season 2. I didn't count how many, but it's at least 6 times. At least. Probably more. Like they were definitely the major reoccurring bad guys, and it was Michael Pillar's intention to keep him that way in season 3, which is part of the reason why they pushed him out. And the first thing they did was to write them off the show immediately. Which, I can't say I disagree with that aspect of it, because the Kazon don't really work as villains, but I don't mind them that much in season 1. I think in Caretaker, they do come off as kind of generic mustache twirly villains. Here, it's a bit complex. I do like Maj Kola specifically as a villain. He has that sense of arrogance. I'm not saying he's anywhere near as good as a villain as Gul Dukat, but he has that same sort of quality as Gul Dukat, that sense of arrogance, and I think the actor who plays him is good. I think the problem with Kulla is not the actor, it's not the character specifically. It's more to do with the Kazon as a whole, because I think the Kazon were just mishandled. They come off as Klingon ripoffs. Now, apparently, the original, and this is probably something I'll get more into in season 2, but the original intention of the Kazon was to be an analogy for LA street gangs, which I would never in a billion years figure that out unless someone told me. Like, I had to read this online to know this, because I don't get that at all. To me, they just come off as trying to do Klingons in the Delta Quadrant. Let's do Klingons with different makeup. Now, okay, so they're not warrior-like. So they're probably more like TOS Klingons. Or at least original series movie Klingons. But yeah, they do kind of, their makeup does kind of look similar to Klingons too. But they're not that bad in this episode. As I said, I think it's in season 2 that they kind of get, especially episodes like Initiations. I'm trying to roll my eyes as much as possible. That they're just kind of, this is so uninteresting and generic. But is it kind of? But I love how they used here, and I love Seska's reasoning. And this is something they'll explore more in the episode Alliances, which I think is a great episode, and we'll get to that. Is that Seska kind of has a point about them needing to make allies to survive. Of course, her going behind Janeway's back and, like, you know, secretly giving them replicators in which they fucking blow themselves up with. Not the best way to handle that. But, yeah. But speaking of Seska, her whole, like, heel turn of, and this, I think this actress is amazing. Like, the way, like, as soon as she dropped the facade of not being Cardassian, she immediately started, like, coming off more as a Cardassian. It's like, we are alone here. Federation rules. Like, I think it's such, and I gotta tell you, when I first saw this episode, I was so blown away by this. I was so shocked. I did not in the billion years see this coming. I was like, the way she just started going off on her is Federation rules, Federation dogmas, Federation compassion. Like, and this is something, again, I'll get more into as we go, but Seska is easily the best villain of Voyager. She is the Gul Dukat of Voyager. Again, not as good. Nobody could be as good as a villain as Gul Dukat, but she is the main villain, the best villain. Fuck, don't even get me started on the Borg Queen. Just don't. Fontaine way. Oh, sorry, I'm letting Kyrie 09 infect me. Anyway, Janeway. No. It is easily Seska. No other villain, recurring villain, even comes close. I mean, singular villains, you got Anorex, but that's just because Year of Hell is just so amazing. But he only appeared in that 1-2-parter, so it doesn't really count. But anyway, yeah, so good. And so a couple of interesting aspects. The food replicator. This is actually a very nice touch, because you think of it as a normal thing. This is what they used to eat. They just go up and, you know, get me a bowl of something and go, and they eat it. It seems like a mundane thing. It's like, if similar to like if people from the 12th century whatever got their hands on microwaves or something. It's like, but it's interesting that something that seems so mundane could actually be so destructive, that it's that had the people like fused to the floor and shit. But it does make sense, because it is like using very sort of, it's just materializing matter like out of energy, like out of thin air, basically. It's just, at least that's how it appears to, you know, less advanced civilization. It just feels like it just makes food, makes products. And I can see how it could transform a less developed society, because it basically is one of the main functions of creating a post-scarcity society. It's basically eliminates scarcity because you can just have you don't have need for poverty or need for trade wars or stuff like a lot of the conflicts and wars throughout history is kind of based on trade to especially modern history, let's be honest here, oil to one degree or another. So if you eliminate that need, you eliminate a lot of the war and conflict, and I think that's why an organization like the Federation can exist. And so again, if you have this technology which may seem mundane to Starfleet, but how this could negatively impact a sort of brutal, uncivilized culture such as the Kazon, and how we will see in a future episode in season 2 what they do when they get their hands on transporter technology, and it kind of works out exactly how you would expect. And so this kind of, but it's so interesting that this is just something they use to make their food could have such a vast sort of cultural impact on a society that doesn't have this technology. It's an interesting thought experiment. So another thing I really, really have to mention that I love that happened in this episode is when Janeway asks B'Elanna, because she wants to. B'Elanna has this plan to go over the Kazon ship, and they have to create a subspace bubble in order to investigate and see what the piece of Federation technology is, because the whole area is fucked up. And Janeway's like, okay, so when can you have it ready? And she's like, I can have it ready by tomorrow. And Janeway says, I want it done by the end of the night. And then B'Elanna just stops her and says, no. When I say tomorrow, I mean tomorrow. I'm not exaggerating. And Janeway's like, okay. Now, this is very significant because, and this is something my ex used to always point out. She always thought it was dumb, cliche of how, I always thought it was silly how throughout Star Trek, and it's not just Scotty, it was actually LaForge a lot and O'Brien. Whenever they say, oh, I can do it in 5 hours, it's like, you have 2 on your way. I was just watching, Daya's Cast, and this has one of the worst examples, because, Sisko is asking how long it would take O'Brien to fix the Defiant, and he says, oh, about 10 hours, and Sisko's like, you have 2 on your way. And how the fuck is he going to do 10 hours worth of work in 2 hours? That's just unreasonable to expect people to do it. And of course, we know the deal with Scotty, that he actually purposely exaggerated so it looked like he would look great when he got it done quicker. Now we know for a fact from Relics that LaForge did not do that. Yet you do get a lot of times with LaForge where Picard would be like, oh, I want to, how long is it going to take you? Oh, it's going to take me 6 hours. I want it done in 3. That is such a cliche. I never realized until she pointed out to me just how often they do that in Star Trek. And it is really silly when you think about it. It is, it's kind of, I think it's the writers just having their way of emphasizing how dire the situation is, or the captain trying to be very authoritative and I'm going to push you to your limits because this is an emergency. But I so love, it's just a minor thing, but I so love how this episode really shatters that cliche. And B'Elanna just stands up to her and is like, no, actually, I cannot get it done by tonight. When I say tomorrow, I mean tomorrow. And I love how Janeway's response was, okay, Lieutenant. And how she doesn't push her on that and be like, oh, well, you're not good enough then if you can't have it done. But she's smart enough to know not to sacrifice, safety. Although, see, B'Elanna, and another point is kind of related, is when B'Elanna beams over to actually do the procedure. And then, Mosh Kola calls and threatens them, so they're like really pressed for time. So Janeway calls over and is like, "Look, B'Elanna, I don't mean to rush you," and she interrupts. She's like, "No, we're done. We're on our way back." So they're like super fast, and that's because they took the time to run tests, to do it properly, and so that way they can just get in there and do it much quicker. Kind of smart. Makes me think maybe I should have put B'Elanna as the best engineer, actually. I think when I did this video a while back, a few years ago, when I was ranking the engineers, and I think I did have B'Elanna quite high, specifically because of this. And I called this out. I called out the fact that this makes her better than Scotty, because she doesn't exaggerate. That she doesn't be like, "Oh, this takes me." She just says exactly how long it's going to be done, and she does it efficiently and smoothly, because she does it correctly, instead of succumbing to captains being like, "Oh, you have 5 hours, on your way." Fuck that. It's just, again, a small thing, but I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the introduction of Leola Root, which is first mentioned in this episode. Again, I don't really like this whole gag of Neelix cooking sucking, and this sort of goes along with it because the Leola Root, especially Neelix, thinks it's the most nutritious, best thing ever, but everyone thinks it tastes like ass. and Joe Carey's like, "Oh, we had this lovely fruit," and Neelix is like, "Oh, if you go ahead and eat it, and it would be great until you die of suffocation." And he was like, started pointing at his crotch. That part of it, I've never been a fan of this whole Leola Root, because it just goes along with the whole BS about Neelix cooking is gross, which I think is dumb. Anyway, I would now like to thank all those that support me on Patreon. It's very much appreciated. This helps me continue with the channel, helps me grow as a person. I'd like to give a big special thanks to Antarius, Jordan Johnson, and Brandon Nealhouse. Thank you all so very, very much for your strong support. I'd also like to give a shout out to Tyler Cease, Benjamin Mead, Greg Marley, Francisco, Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky, Matty Jester, Joe Lavals, Alessandro Miguelesio, Norman Buckwald, Stephen Kennedy, Britton Berg, and Allison Fordyce. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. So we do have a few Patreon comments on this episode. First comment is from Kyrie091, who says, "State of Flux? More like, great, this sucks." Actually, despite the fact that this episode should have been called Mate, This Trucks, I enjoy the episode. I like Seska as a villain and think she has so much potential. I'll complain more about losing her when we get to Basics Part 2. For real, Seska is great. Did you know that Martha Hackett, who plays Seska, auditioned for the role of Jadzia Dax? I love Terry Farrell, of course, but you always wonder, In the meantime, let's all enjoy this episode, Plate of Fucks, or Rent a Tux, or Gate for Trucks, sorry. I don't know, this episode lends itself to a lot of great names, but nothing will ever top Booty Crap Pally. See, this is where I disagree with you. I always told you that I think your whole booty crap thing is overrated, but I'm going to say definitively now, the best sort of rhyme or play on the title that you come up with is this. Great, this sucks. I laughed my head off when I first read that. You love this episode, I love this episode, but still, State of Flux, oh great, this sucks. For some reason, that just tickles my fancy bone. My funny bone, I should say. And so, from now on, if you ever bring up booty crap, I'm going to bring up great, this sucks. Because I think great, this sucks is your crowning achievement. I think that is not booty crap. Great, this sucks. I just think that is pure amazing. And all the other ones you came up with: Plate of Fucks, Rent-A-Tux, Gate for Trucks, Mate This Trucks. But Great This Sucks is definitely the best. That is your best one by far, and I'm sticking to that because I have had enough of you. Anyway, next comment is from Norman Buckwald, who says, if I was part of the writing team, I would have proposed this. First, yes, whatever is going on between Chakotay and Seska should have been brought up, even if only hints, earlier in the season and in at least 2 episodes beforehand. And here's an even more radical proposal. Have Carrie be the one conspiring with the Kazon. Wait. Hear me out. Seska will still be an Obsidian Order Cardassian spy disguising as Bajoran in the Maquis, but she would have made an interesting internal foe, which granted Seven sort of did later on, but think of the potential here. An uneasy ally who you can't even trust right in the crew. It would do a lot with Janeway, Chakotay, and Tuvok, that aspect alone. Then in the second season, I could more easily buy Michael Jonas in cahoots with Carrie, as it's odd that a Maquis member would be conspiring with, I don't know, their enemy. Okay, I'm really off track here. I really liked this episode and wish Voyager had more episodes like this one. It really builds continuity, brought up what I think is one of the more interesting villains in Trek. Seska and the whole mystery and revelation was rewarding, I'd argue, not only for the TNG and DS9 fans, but even those watching Voyager for the first time. The only reason I can't give this episode a 10 and have to ding it is bringing up the past relationship with Chakotay out of nowhere. In fact, it seems so thrown in there for the plot, I'll have to give it 8 forbidden mushroom soups out of 10. The Chakotay and Seska thing is a very good point. That is something I forgot to bring up. That is a retcon. That is clear that they didn't. In fact, I read a quote of saying that I believe it was it Jerry Taylor or Michael Piller? I think it was Jerry. One of them came up with the whole. I think it was Jerry Taylor came up with the whole Chakotay and Seska being an item. But it's obvious to me that they didn't come up with it until they were finalizing this episode, because they didn't imply this in the least before this episode. So this is kind of, I guess, where their pre-planning kind of fell apart, because if they wanted to have this be a thing, they should have hinted at it. They shouldn't just come up with it at the last second. So, but for me, it's a minor thing. It doesn't bother me as much. It is more obvious, that they didn't plan for it. But it works so well with this episode that I'm actually willing to forgive it a lot. Now, as for your idea of having Joe Carey be the Kazon collaborator and not Seska, I actually think it's a good idea. I think you actually proved your point. I think you made some really strong points here. That it would have been less expected. But this episode was like. So here's the thing. When I was watching this episode, I thought it was Joe Carey, and here's why. Because Seska is too obvious, and they almost never go with the obvious choice. They always try to trick you. They always try to fool you. You're like, ha, it wasn't the obvious person. And so when it was the obvious person, I actually felt tricked because I was like, I didn't think they would actually have the balls to go with the obvious person. I thought they would try to be like, ha, and make it Joe Carey. So if they did make it Joe Carey, it would be like that cliche, ha, it was the person you least expect. But I really like your point about having Seska around, knowing that she's a Cardassian. But she didn't betray them to the Kazon, so she's still a member of the crew. And the tension that you could build. I think there's actually way more potential in that than having her be this villain over on with the Kazon that we see from time to time. As much as I love her as a villain, I think that actually that could have been better. And then having Carrie as the villain would have, instead of just having him disappear and then bring him back after 5 years just to fucking kill him off, like 3 episodes before the last episode. Like, what the fuck was that? But anyways, I think that would have been better. I will say. So anyway, next comment is from Stephen Kennedy, who says, yet another great episode of Voyager, but with my other comments, I'm not going to talk about it. Welcome to my mooning sessions about the show instead. In honor of the worst character in Star Trek, Ro the Traitor Laren, and yes, it's a response to this video coming soon on the EOE network, why Vic Fontaine is the worst character in Star Trek. Now, where was I? Oh yeah, as I was a moaning bitch, I will do the same for Voyager. 2 crimes happened in this episode. 1, Lieutenant Joe Carey should have been more of a regular on Voyager and not killed off near the end of the show. 2, the timeline of the Maquis is awful. This episode stated that the Maquis is over 2 years old. What is weird, the episode Journey's End was made 13 months before this episode. This makes my claim that the real Maquis was created after the episode The Wounded. So my rating is 8. I didn't mention Seska as a crime as it wasn't a mooning matter out of 10. Prime Factors comment, my rating is 8. Why is the crew so desperate to get home? And in the episode Endgame, it's the journey, not the destination out of 10. Well, I can answer that question for you right now. It's because Endgame fucking sucks! That's why, because it ruins the episode, doesn't understand the fucking show, ruins the show. It is not true to what the show is about, and it was written by fucking hack Rick Berman who doesn't know how to write if his fucking life depended on it. That's why. Sorry. Oh, geez, I don't like Endgame. What a shock. Now, here's the thing. You say that Joe Carey should have been more of a regular in Voyager and not killed off near the end of the show. I 100% agree with that. Where I disagree is you referring to as a crime that happens in this episode. Because that doesn't happen in this episode. It happens after this episode when they don't bring him back. They should have kept bringing him back. And it also happens when they do bring him back and just to kill him off. So, arguably, it's not a crime that happens in this episode. So, I don't think you can hold it against this episode, personally. And as for the timeline of the Maquis, yeah, no, I disagree with your theory about the Wounded. I'm sorry. I just, no indication of that. That they're in any way related, and it has nothing to do with the demilitarized zone or any of those specific details. But yeah, I also noticed, to be fair, when I was watching this episode, I did notice them mentioning the Maquis was 2 years old. I'm like, wait a second. It hasn't been 2 years. They just introduced them in the previous season of DS9, and this is concurrent with season 3 of DS9, and they introduced them towards the end of season 2. So, like, but to me, I just see that as a continuity, a slight like typo, continuity error, just a little mistake that is not that big of a deal. And yes, you continue to be wrong about Leroy Larry. That's fine. And yeah, I am planning on making a video why Vic Fontaine is the worst character in Star Trek. Because he is. Pally. Anyway, next comment is from Tyler Cease, who says, State of Flux is an engaging episode of Star Trek Voyager that delivers a thrilling storyline and an unexpected twist. The discovery of a traitor on board the ship adds an element of suspense and intrigue to the plot, leaving viewers on the edge of their seats as the crew races to uncover the culprit. The revelation of Seska as the traitor is a shocking turn of events, especially given her history with Chakotay and the Maquis. This development not only adds depth to her character, but also raises questions about trust and loyalty within the crew. Questions for discussion. Were you surprised by the revelation of Seska as the traitor? How do you think this betrayal will impact Chakotay and the rest of the crew moving forward? What do you think the consequences should be for Seska's actions? So the first one, were you surprised with the revelation of Seska as a traitor? Absolutely. But as I said, I was surprised in this episode because I thought she was too obvious of a choice. I thought they were going to try to fool you with Joe Carey. But I had no idea that she was a Cardassian. That was a shock. That was a good twist. And, of course, I know how the betrayal will impact Chakotay and the rest of the crew because I've seen the show. But if I were to speculate, pretend like I haven't seen the show, I think the ending kind of makes it clear that Chakotay feels fooled. He feels like a fool, and that this would sort of play on him and sort of grate him and bother him, and which is exactly what the writers smartly did. And of course, the whole crew, yes, they definitely see her as the villain. And I do get Norman's point that maybe it would have been interesting if they didn't do that, and if they played with it a bit more. But yeah. And what do you think the consequences should be for Seska's actions? Well, I don't know, because we know what the consequences will be. But yeah, I don't know. If she never got away, let's just hypothetical situation. She never beamed away. Voyager was actually, I don't know, put up their shields or disable the transporters before they confronted Seska. Maybe they should have foreseen her doing something like this. Then what should they have done with her? I think, and from a storytelling perspective, and this again is something I'll talk about in season 3 because I think this is what they should have done with her in season 3, but they could have done it here as well. And what I think would have happened here is they could have thrown her in the brig, but not knowing what to do with her because they can't keep her forever, and she's sort of become this antagonist that tries to help the crew, but she can't be trusted. There's some really interesting avenues of storytelling that they could have explored. But as I said, I'll cover this more when I get to season 3. Although I've already covered basics. So I'll cover it in a revisited if you're a patron supporter, I guess. I don't know. Maybe I'll find some way to slip it in there to other reviews I haven't done yet. Anyway, next comments from Antarius, who says, Leola root, I completely forgot about them. I bet they can be used to make coffee too. This is a great episode. It really pays off that Seska was well introduced by this point. A lot of strong scenes and good performances by the actors. Even the Kazon was not as bad as in later episodes. Janeway is very sure that option 2 presented by Tuvok can't be true because there's no reports of missing ships. Either her memory is very bad or she missed a report about the Equinox. I wonder why Janeway didn't also suspect Torres to be a traitor. After all, she disobeyed orders just in the last episode. Next week on Voyager, the crew trades a copy of the Vic Fontaine program against transport technology. My rating is a strong 9 out of 10. So I did notice that thing about the Equinox because she did mention, I haven't heard anything about ships being lost recently, and I thought, Equinox. But here's the thing. Equinox is a retcon. And it's a bad retcon. And again, this is something, I already covered that episode, so I already covered this, but I guess when I get to revisit it for that. But the whole reason of why the ship was there when he was like, we were brought by the caretaker. Doesn't make any fucking sense. It doesn't make any sense why Ransom was brought by the caretaker. If he was, why didn't he use the caretaker array to get home? Like the way that Voyager would have done if it wasn't for the fact they had to destroy the array. But if Equinox came before them, they would not have the same situation. So why the fuck didn't they use it to get home? Would the caretaker overpower them? And why would the caretaker bring them in? And I don't know. It's just lazy ass writing. The fact that they're like, oh, we'll compare notes later, and they never actually say on screen, is because they don't give a shit. They should have come up with a better explanation than that. So I kind of see the whole Equinox thing as the thing that's being out of place. Yeah, it doesn't fit with future continuity, but that's because the future seasons don't give a fuck about continuity. Anyway, next comment is from Ricky, who says, this is what I think of how great season 1 is. You have an absolutely amazing episode like Eye of the Needle, Prime Factors, this episode, and finally Jetrel are the 4 singular best episodes of season 1, and that's what makes this one of the best seasons of the show. Now, to be fair, this episode would be the bottom of the 4, as I didn't have the extremely powerful emotion moments like the other 3 episodes, but it's still a great episode. And again, the show being serialized at this stage where Seska wasn't a character that came out of nowhere. She was a recurring background character, and she played a big part on the previous episode, and that's what makes this so powerful and memorable. And after just watching the show a few months ago, I've come to the conclusion that Seska is the best villain the show had, and she does come off as a great antagonist, and I totally buy that she would team up with the Kazon. Everything was suspenseful, the characters were great. God, I miss the earlier episodes of Voyager. The quality is so much better. So my rating is a 9 out of 10. I mean, I don't know what else is there to say other than we could not be more in agreement. Could not possibly agree with you anymore. You took the words right out of my mouth. 100% to everything you said. Next comment is from Brandon Neal Howes, who says, remember those horrific Cabbage Patch dolls look-alikes from Caretaker who we haven't seen since the pilot? Well, the Kazon are back, baby, and I can hardly contain my joy. Yeah, right. Who knew Chakotay and Seska were a couple? Jeez, he'll be throwing himself at a sexy ex-Borg if he isn't careful. No. Why is Joe Carey from engineering on an away team finding poison apples? I always thought Seska was dodgy. I just wish more of the Maquis crew members had opinions. Seska isn't too bright either, allying herself with the Kazon. This episode could have and should have been so much better. It makes Janeway look like a weakling who can't cope without Tuvok. And speaking of Tuvok, why didn't he just mind meld with Joe Carey? I ate homemade mushroom soup tonight. Does anyone feel like sharing a meal and planning a mutiny? Please leave your Leola roots behind. 5 kilo fruits out of 10. Well, definitely disagree with you on this episode, but that's okay. The one thing about Seska being dodgy is that, and this gets back to Norman's comment, is that I think it might have been better if they kept her in the show. If they didn't say she was a Cardassian or Kazon, and just kept her as this ruffian character, because I think B'Elanna and Joe Carey had this really interesting dynamic that you saw both in the previous episode and in this one, and I am disappointed that we lost that, as particularly I like what they did with Seska going forward, but just making Joe Carey disappear is like, why would you waste him like that? Like, he had a good thing going here. But yeah. Oh, Chakotay throwing himself on an ex-Borg. Oh no. But no, I do buy that she would team up with the Kazon, because they're the power. And she would flock to the power of the quadrant. That makes sense to me. Anyway, thank you very much, patrons, for your comments. So, my rating for State of Flux out of 10 is a 10, the best. Now, I gotta be honest, I was really torn between a 9 and a 10. Like, really torn. And I wasn't sure which way I was going to go when I started recording this review. And I was leaning towards a 9. Because that's what I have given this episode in the past. But I'm sorry, finding out that information that they were planning for this all along, and hearing that quote from Jerry Taylor, that pushes it to a 10 to me. That makes this episode even better. The fact that they had planned this all along. And I know it's like, well, what difference does it make, because you should go by what you see on screen, which is usually what I say too. Like, behind the scenes details shouldn't really, shouldn't really affect your judgment on, piece of fiction, an episode or movie or whatever. You should judge it on its own merits. I always say that. But in this case, it has more to do with the fact that Star Trek didn't do this enough. The fact that, as particularly Voyager, will go downhill because it will not do this. And it's such a shining example. It really shows to me that how awesome Jerry Taylor and Michael Piller are, and how much better the show was in their hands. So because of that pushes it up to a 10. 10 out of 10, the best. So that is it for my review of State of Flux. So if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment below, stuff like that. And if you really want to support my channel, I'd be very thankful if you did. You could consider supporting me on Patreon. There's a link in the description below. Different rewards for different tiers, and I do a Patreon-only series where I revisit reviews that I've already done, as I sort of alluded to earlier. And you could request a video for me to do, leave a comment for me to read in the video, all sorts of goodies that you could check out if you are so inclined to do so. So, let's see what's coming up here on the old channel here. Thursday will be my review for Through the Looking Glass. Saturday, I'll be over on Patreon doing one of those patron-exclusive videos revisiting my review for Improbable Calls and the Dice Cast. And then on Monday, back here on my main channel for another new review, reviewing the Voyager episodes, Heroes and Demons. So that's what's coming up on my channel. Be sure to check it out as I continue to cover Star Trek Voyager and Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and many other Star Trek videos and many other things as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.